All right, so today we're going to be converting between fractions, decimals, and percents. Then we're going to look at some applications where you're taking a percentage or a fraction of a number, etc. So this is going to go a little further than just plain converting. Now, this is not a skill that you will need for the MCAT. And I'm telling you that because that means you can use your calculator, and I'm going to encourage you to use your calculator. This is much more difficult to do by hand. So if you have your calculators, please get them out. If you don't have it, look on with someone else because you're going to want these keystrokes to become part of your memory. Okay? So make sure that you're really learning these keystrokes. Okay? And most of you have done this kind of thing. This is something that we do in numbers starting way back in year 8. So you've seen it before, but just to remind you. Okay? So to change from a fraction to a decimal, you're simply going to divide the numerator by the denominator. Okay. So it's just in your calculator, the keystrokes are just numerator divided by the denominator, and of course, enter or equals to get the solution. Okay. And we're going to have plenty of these. We're going to have a whole table of these that you're going to work on, so plenty of these for you to practice with. Now, to change a decimal to a percent, you need to multiply by 100, okay? Okay, no, she doesn't have it here. So, and then make sure that you add the percent symbol. Don't forget to put that in there. So, to change a decimal to a percent, simply multiply by 100 and then add the percent symbol. Now, when it's a decimal, that also means you can use the shortcut of simply moving the decimal. But you really need to think of percent as times 100 because not all decimals are nice even ones, right? Sometimes they repeat. And also, you need to know how to change a fraction to a percent. It's the same process. If you enter the fraction and put times 100, it'll automatically change it into a percent for you, right? So you don't have to do the math. So you could put to change a decimal or a fraction to a percent. It's both. As long as you do that multiply by 100 thing, instead of just moving the decimal, it's the same process for both. One process for more than one thing is a good thing. Okay? All right. And then finally, to change a percent to a fraction, you're simply going to put it over 100. Okay? So anytime you're changing from percent, that means divide by 100. So a decimal or a fraction, doesn't matter. Just divide it by 100. And we talked enough about fractions that you know that divide by 100 just means put 100 underneath, right? Okay? All right. Now there's some fractions and decimals and percents that you just need to learn. And you've probably seen them plenty of times that you can. Just know those because they're the most frequent ones you're going to use when so 1/3 and 2/3, they're the most frequent ones, repeating decimals that you're going to learn and use. So make sure you memorize those. Well, we're going to fill out this chart in a minute, but before we do that, we're going to work together to do the first row, the first two problems there. This has a line in between, so it's separating it off into two sections, right? So the first one, we have a fraction. We want to convert it to a decimal, and we want to convert that then to a percent. Okay? To be as accurate as possible, you should not convert to a decimal. If you convert to a decimal, as long as it's a terminating decimal, meaning that it stops, it doesn't repeat and go on forever, then you can just convert the decimal straight onto a percent. But if it's a repeating decimal or anything weird, go back to your fraction and multiply that by 100. Okay? So because it will give you a more accurate answer without having to do any rounding or any weird stuff. There's a strange process for converting if it's repeating, so don't worry about it. So 3 over 4, to convert it to a decimal, what are my keystrokes? Numerator divided by denominator. So 3 divided by 4, anybody?
0.75.
There you go. That's one of those that hopefully you know anyway, but if you don't worry about it. You can always do the process. To convert that to a percentage, I need to take 0.5 times what?
100.
And what do I get? 75, and make sure you add the percent symbol at the end. Okay? Super easy day for you guys, right? Okay, here we're given a percent. We need to change it to a fraction or a decimal. To convert a percent, we always simply divide by what? 100. So do 30 divided by 100, and what does that give you as a decimal, guys? 0.03, right? Now, if you can read that decimal, you can change it to a fraction. So what does 0.03 mean? 3. Remember that each one of those places is a 10. So that's the tenths column, right? So that's the hundredths. So 3 hundredths, that's your fraction. Okay? So if you can read it, you can do it. Yes? 0.3. I'm sorry. I don't know. I thought I was listening to you guys. Okay. Let's go back. So we get 0.3. So that's 3 what? Tenths. So 3 tenths. So it's 3 over 10. Now, also look on your calculator. Great. Enshrined in my recording, there's a mistake. That's good. Oh well. Life goes on. Now, also look at your calculator. You have a fraction button. Okay? And you may also have a button that has SD on it. It looks like this. It's got S, then a double arrow, and then D. Do you see that anywhere? Okay? Everybody see it?
I have an FD.
FD. So you have an American calculator? Is it a Casio or a TI?
Casio.
It's a Casio with FD. Oh, wow. Okay. Cool. I didn't know they did that. Okay. SD or FD, same thing. That is the key that will convert a fraction to a decimal and back again. Right? So enter the decimal 0.3 and then hit that key and notice what it does. Now it's going to write it fun. It's going to look funny. Okay. Yeah. It's enter. Yes. Yeah, just a random button. Okay. What did it give you? 3 over 10, right? So it'll make a fraction for you. Now you could also enter a fraction and push that same button and it'll convert it to a decimal. So you can convert fractions and decimals really easy using that button. Okay? So these are the keys depending on your calculator. And if you have a different calculator, go to YouTube and learn how to do it because it's important. Okay? You don't want to have to sit and do this by hand. And hitting one button is a lot easier. Okay? Good job. So you're going to have some of those where you're just going to be converting back and forth. Actually, just put quite a lot of them on here. Well, that'll be fun. So, she's also got on here some examples in words because remember, you're not going to be having a big page where you're converting back and forth by pushing them in the calculator. You're going to have to actually do it in context. So let's look at a couple of these together so we can see what's going on. If you have the phrase out of, remember what it's got of in it, but it's out of. Do you remember what operation that means?
Fraction.
It means a fraction, right? So or divide. So 80 out of 90 houses have Sky TV. So that becomes the fraction, what? 80 over 90, right? So you just take 80 over 90 and convert it to a percent by multiplying it times what? 100. So you can do it all in the same exact process. So put 80 over 100 using your fraction key. And remember your fraction key on your calculator looks like that, right? So what you do is push, depending on your calculator, if you have one of these graphics calculators, you push that button and it's going to give you 2 places where you can enter a fraction, or depending on your calculator, or you can put the number, then you hit the fraction button and then put in the second one. Depending on your calculator, you're going to have to decide which one. And then just times 100. And anybody want to tell me what you get? Anybody? Nobody?
It just says 800.
Sorry?
Oh, I got 88.8888889.
Okay. And she doesn't say anything about rounding or anything, but we'll round it to 2 decimal places. So 88.89% of the houses have Sky TV. Or whatever it is. Yeah, Sky TV. Okay? So make sure that you know how to enter a fraction on your calculator. You do not want to be messing around with this when you do the test, right? So make sure you practice it beforehand. Okay? All right. Let's see. I'm not going to do too many of these. So let's do down number 5. Rosa got 17 out of 30 on her test and 65 out of 80 in the other. On which test should she get a better mark? I guarantee you will have to compare two amounts like this on the test. So that's 17 out of 30, which is 17 over 30, right? 65 out of 80, so 65 out of 80. I want to compare those. In order to compare them, I need to change them to like things. I could either get a common denominator, which would be a lot of work, or I could just change them both to what? Yeah, I could just change them to decimals. Yeah? So you can compare decimals easier. When you're comparing decimals, all you have to do is line up the decimal points and compare the first number you come to and then on from left to right. So what is 17 over 30 as a decimal, somebody? 5.7?
Yeah,
Rounding? Okay, that's fine for a grade. And besides, we're only doing a comparison. What's 65 divided by 80? Somebody?
0.81.
Okay. And we've lined up the decimals, so all we have to do is compare these numbers. We see that the 8 is bigger, so that means that that's the better test. Guaranteed to see that on this test, where you're comparing two fractional amounts. Okay? So know how to do that. It's easier. You could compare the fractions by getting a common denominator and looking at the numerators, but it's a lot easier just to put them in your calculator, change them to decimals, then compare the decimals. Remember, when you're comparing decimals, just line up the decimal points. Okay? I'm going to change that a little bit. And don't pay attention to the biggest number you see. Pay attention to the numbers in the same column. So here's zeros. We can't compare there. We can't compare there. So we'll compare the 1 and 3. So the bottom one is the bigger number, even though the top one has 12 in it, right? You're comparing place values. Remember that? All right. So, never mind. I've got to scroll down anyway, so it's going to get rid of everything. Oh, round to 1 decimal places where needed. How come y'all aren't telling me these directions when y'all see those? I know you do. Okay. Right. 3/5 of the hamburgers in the butcher's shop are beef and the rest are vegetarian. What fraction are vegetarian? Pretty easy. If 3/5 are beef, then the only thing left over is 2/5, right? So 2/5 are vegetarian. Or you could just subtract the 3/5 from what number? 1, because 1 is the whole amount, so 1 minus those. So that's kind of like the ones we did last time. Okay? So out of is the big deal. Now taking a percentage of, so 55% of the students come by bus. What is this as a fraction? So again, just a conversion. Looks good? Okay. Then go to work. I at least want this table completed before we're done. And then you can move on to, you can open up your OneNote and do the other problems as well.